Hey everybody, and welcome back! I'm really glad you're here. This is part 4 of our Minecraft survival series, and today we're just going to relax, hang out, and read through some Reddit stories together while we play. If you watched the last episode, you'll probably remember that we stumbled across a massive cave system that looked way too good to ignore. Well, today's the day. We're finally heading down there to see what we can find. Hopefully we come back with a nice haul of iron, coal, and, if Minecraft decides to be nice to us for once, maybe even a few diamonds. We're also going to keep making progress on our underground base. It's finally starting to come together, but there's still a lot I want to work on before I'd call it finished. So get comfortable, grab a snack or a drink if you've got one, and let's jump back into the world. We've got plenty of exploring to do, and, of course, a whole bunch of Reddit stories to read together. Alright, let's kick things off with this one. Something tells me the title isn't really about college tuition. It's probably about everything behind it. AITA for announcing that my dad isn't paying my college tuition? My aunt and uncle are paying for my cousin's college. My dad had a college fund for me, but it came with conditions. I couldn't get below a B, he had to pre-approve my classes. We had to have weekly meetings about my grades, and a bunch of other rules. That would probably be fine if I had a normal dad. Uh-oh. Whenever someone says, if I had a normal dad, you know there's a story coming. My dad has a terrible temper. From 6th grade through high school, I was constantly stressed about grades because I'd get screamed at. Sometimes I'd even get in trouble for things that weren't my fault, like a teacher forgetting to update the online grade book. He'd also randomly search my backpack and my locker, just to make sure I wasn't hiding anything. Man, that sounds exhausting. Not because of the grades, because you'd constantly feel like you're waiting for the next thing to go wrong. So I decided to pay for college myself. I'd rather take on student debt than spend 4 more years feeling controlled. I've just finished my first year. Honestly, that's a pretty huge decision. Taking on debt isn't fun, but I can definitely understand choosing peace of mind. Then my family got together for the 4th of July. They were talking about my cousin's college, when my uncle looked at my dad and asked, "So, how much is school costing you?" I replied, "Why are you asking him? I'm the one paying for it." I mean, that's just factually true. Later, my dad got angry. He said I embarrassed him, and that it was out of line to say that. OP says, "I wasn't trying to embarrass him, I was just being honest. He doesn't even know how much my tuition is, so he was the wrong person to ask." You know, I kept waiting for the part where OP publicly called him out, but that never really happened. They answered a question. That's it. If someone asks who's paying your tuition, and the answer is, you are. It's not rude to say so, it's just reality. I also find it interesting that the dad wasn't upset about not paying. He was upset that other people found out he wasn't paying. There's a difference. Because if he genuinely believed those conditions were reasonable, why not just tell everyone? Yeah, I offered, but they didn't want my help. Instead, he got embarrassed. That kind of tells me he already knew how it looked. The more I think about it, the college fund almost doesn't matter. OP wasn't rejecting free money. They were rejecting years of stress that came attached to it. And honestly, sometimes the most expensive money is the money that isn't really free. For me, this one's a pretty easy NTA. If telling the truth makes someone look bad, sometimes the truth isn't the problem. Alright. This one feels like it's going to turn into one of those family arguments where everyone starts with good intentions and somehow ends up arguing about bacon. WIBTA for refusing to stop cooking bacon in my kitchen because of my teenage daughter's vegan lifestyle. I'm the dad. I love my daughter to pieces, but my wife and I aren't seeing eye to eye on this. We've always been a meat-eating family. We live in the rural Midwest, and bacon for breakfast is pretty much a tradition. This year, my 14-year-old daughter decided to become vegan. I supported her completely. We learned new recipes, bought vegan substitutes, adjusted the grocery budget, basically did everything we could to help. So far, Dad actually sounds pretty supportive. Like, more supportive than a lot of parents would have been. The problem started when she saw me cook bacon in a frying pan. Afterward, I rinsed the pan and put it in the dishwasher. She got upset and said, "That's my pan for vegan food." I told her, "Kiddo, that's the family pan. It's older than you." Okay, that line actually got me. She asked if I could buy her a separate pan just for vegan food. I said sure. I even ordered colored pans so I'd remember they were only for her meals. Honestly, that's a pretty reasonable compromise. But that wasn't enough. Now she says the dishwasher is contaminated with animal products. The fridge has bacon grease fingers on it, and she's asking both parents to completely stop eating meat inside the house. Wait, we're escalating fast. Her mom thinks maybe we should consider it. She says both sets of grandparents live nearby, so we could just eat meat there instead. The daughter says she's perfectly fine with cheese and butter. It's specifically meat products that make her feel sick. The dad says, "I feel bad for her, but I'm not going to stop eating bacon in my own house." This one's interesting, because I actually understand where both sides are coming from, at least at first. If your daughter becomes vegan, supporting her is great. Buying separate cookware? Sure. Learning recipes? Awesome. Making sure she has options? Absolutely. But there's a point where accommodation starts turning into control. The request stopped being, "Can I have my own pan?" which Dad immediately agreed to. It turned into, "Nobody else gets to cook meat in the house." That's a completely different conversation. I also noticed something kind of funny. She's okay with butter, she's okay with cheese, but bacon is where the line gets drawn. So this doesn't really sound like avoiding all animal products. It sounds more like a specific emotional reaction to meat, which is valid, but it doesn't automatically mean everyone else has to change what they eat. And the mom's solution: just eat meat at the grandparents' houses. I don't know. That feels harder than simply letting people cook dinner in their own kitchen. I honestly think Dad handled this pretty well. He listened. He compromised. He bought new cookware without arguing. He didn't mock her for becoming vegan. He took it seriously. That's about all you can really ask. For me, the separate pans, totally reasonable. Separate cutting boards if she wanted them? Honestly, I'd probably do that too. Banning bacon from the house forever? That's where I'd say, yeah, that's asking too much. So for me, I'd go with NTA. Supporting someone's lifestyle doesn't have to mean completely giving up your own. Living together usually means everybody compromises a little. Not that one person gets to rewrite the house rules for everyone else. All right, this one sounds heavy. And judging by what I'm reading, I don't think this is really about the airport anymore. It sounds like we're getting the update after everything happened. Update. I don't even know where to begin. It's been an absolute nightmare recently, and I felt like I was losing my sanity. For some background, my husband's mom has always favored him over his siblings. That favoritism affected his relationship with his brothers and sisters, and eventually with me. My husband never saw a problem with it. I did. The whole family dynamic always made me uncomfortable. Going low contact with his mom was never even an option. He had to either see her or call her every single day. That's a lot. Most of his siblings barely speak to him anymore. I honestly believe it's because of the favoritism. He shares some of the blame, because he still refuses to see how unhealthy it is. I've caught myself making excuses for his behavior, even while writing about it. I think it's because I love him, and I desperately wanted to fix things without letting them destroy our marriage. Man, that sentence hits, because sometimes you don't even realize you're defending someone who's hurting you. After everything with the trip, he tried talking to me, but most of what he said was blaming me. I couldn't keep arguing, so I told him I needed space, and that I'd stay with my sister for a while. He didn't take it well. He stood up, opened the front door, and told me to leave right then. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. That was the moment everything became clear. I pictured years of my life looking exactly like this, and realized I couldn't keep doing it. He always had to be right. His mom could never do anything wrong. And I was always the aggressive, crazy, jealous, pathetic one.
That's exhausting. Not because couples never argue, they do. But if one person is always the problem, eventually you stop feeling like a partner. You start feeling like the family scapegoat. Right now I'm staying with my sister. I brought my dog with me. My husband sent one last message saying, "You're the one choosing to end what we had." But I believe it's the other way around. He keeps making his mom the victim. I don't expect him to change anymore. I'm just trying to decide what's best for my future, even if that's separation and divorce. You know, when I saw the title, I figured this was going to be another story about an overbearing mother-in-law, but it really wasn't. It was about a husband who never drew a line. And after a while, that became the real issue. The thing that stood out to me most wasn't even the argument. It was OP saying she kept making excuses for him. That happens more often than people realize. When you're in the middle of a relationship, you slowly normalize things that would have seemed completely unacceptable from the outside. And then one moment comes along. Sometimes something as simple as your spouse opening the door and telling you to leave. And suddenly, everything clicks. Not because of that one moment alone, but because it confirms everything you've been feeling for years. I honestly hope both of them find some peace, whether that's somehow working things out or going their separate ways. Because living in the middle of that kind of constant tension sounds exhausting. Based on this update, it feels like OP already knows the answer, and sometimes making the hardest decision is also the healthiest one. Okay, this one already feels heartbreaking, because no matter what happens, somebody is going to get hurt. AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's husband's surgery with my inheritance? I'm 18. My sister is 27. We lost our dad a year ago. He was my only parent. He left both of us an inheritance. My sister spent hers on new cars and renovating her house. I live with my aunt because my brother-in-law didn't want me living with my sister. Wait, that's kind of an important detail. The guy now asking for help didn't even want OP living in the house. I've always wanted to become a doctor. I'm planning to use my inheritance to pay for college. My sister and I haven't been close for years. Things changed after she married her husband. He made backhanded comments about my dad, mocked his illness,
And even caused a scene at Dad's funeral. But because he's chronically ill, nobody held him accountable. Man, that would have been hard to forget. My sister has been visiting more often recently. Her husband has serious heart problems and needs surgery. She kept bringing up my inheritance. I kept changing the subject. Eventually, she directly asked me to pay for the surgery. She promised she'd pay me back within a year. But OP says she doesn't believe her sister can actually repay that much money before college starts. And that's the problem. Not because loans between family never work, but because this isn't $20. This is OP's entire future. So I said no. My sister had a complete meltdown. She called me heartless, cruel, said education means nothing compared to someone's health. She asked if I'd be happy seeing her become a widow and my nephew grow up without a father. My aunt stayed mostly neutral, but warned me this could permanently damage our relationship. Now my sister keeps texting me family pictures, saying, "This is what you're saying no to." My friend told me they should sell the cars and expensive things they bought with their inheritance first. He also warned me if I lend them the money, I'll probably never see it again. This one is rough because the surgery itself is a real emergency. I'm not doubting that. But there's another part of the story that keeps sticking in my head. The inheritance. One sister used hers, the other saved hers. Now, the sister who already spent hers wants access to the one who didn't. If OP gives away that money and doesn't get it back, medical school could be gone. Not delayed, gone. That's a massive gamble for someone who's only 18. And honestly, the emotional pressure really bothered me. Sending family photos, talking about becoming a widow, saying education isn't important. That's not asking anymore. That's guilt. I also couldn't stop thinking about the friend's point. If they own multiple new cars, or recently renovated the house, Those are assets. Those can be sold. They're painful sacrifices, absolutely. But asking an 18-year-old to sacrifice her entire education before sacrificing luxury purchases? That feels backwards. I genuinely feel sorry for the sister. I can't imagine watching your spouse go through serious heart problems. That's terrifying. But I don't think fear gives someone the right to spend somebody else's future. For me, this is NTA. And I really hope OP protects that inheritance. Because sometimes the hardest thing you can say is no to people you love. Especially when they're asking for something you simply can't afford to lose.
Here's another story that caught my attention. And judging by the title alone, I have a feeling this isn't really about the wedding. AITA for storming out of my sister's wedding after she deadnamed my son. I'm a 45-year-old single father of 3. My wife passed away 10 years ago. I have 3 sons, Andrew, Connor, and Max. Connor was assigned female at birth. He's transgender. He came out 5 years ago and has socially transitioned, but not medically. My family has known for about 2 years. Some people adjusted well, some not so much. My sister has always been pretty indifferent. Okay, let's keep reading. Sometimes indifferent can mean respectful but uninvolved. Other times, not so much. My sister got married recently. She wanted the men wearing shirts and ties and the women in sundresses. The day before the wedding, I texted her a picture of our outfits. She replied, "Where's Nia's dress?" Yeah, that's probably not an accident. I told her not to deadname my son. I said Connor would be wearing a shirt and tie like every other guy there, or we simply wouldn't come. She replied, "Fine." So we went. At the reception, she looked annoyed that Connor was wearing a tie, but she didn't really say anything. Then we found our seats. Connor's place card didn't say Connor. It said, Nia. Whew, that's rough. Especially after they'd already had a conversation about it. The dad walked over and asked what happened. His sister said, "I used their real name." He told her they were leaving. She replied, "Don't you dare make a scene at my wedding. Nia can be a guy any other day." He called her a bigot, and the family left. Now the rest of the family says he ruined the wedding. The thing that stands out to me is that this wasn't some random mistake. If she'd accidentally slipped up, that would be one thing. People make mistakes, especially when they've known someone by another name for years. But they had already talked about it the day before. The dad made it crystal clear. She acknowledged it. And then she still printed the old name onto the seating card. That doesn't really feel accidental. I also don't think the father was looking for a confrontation. From what we read, he warned her ahead of time exactly what the boundary was. She knew what would happen if she crossed it. And then she crossed it anyway. I do understand that people want their wedding day to go smoothly. Nobody wants conflict at a reception. But respecting a guest's name isn't some huge, unreasonable request. It's one place card. One word. That's all it would have taken to avoid the entire situation. I also can't imagine what Connor must have felt in that moment. Walking into a room, seeing everyone else's cards, then finding yours with a name you've already told people not to use. That would have been incredibly uncomfortable, maybe even humiliating. This feels like one of those situations where people later say, "Why couldn't everyone just keep the peace?" But keeping the peace usually isn't possible when one side keeps pushing someone else's boundaries on purpose. I'm curious what you guys think about this one. Would you have stayed to avoid making a scene? Or would you have walked out too?
I wasn't expecting this title, because at first glance it sounds like someone got caught hiding something. Let's see if that's actually what happened. AITA for having a wedding without telling everyone we were already legally married? About 2 months ago. My husband and I had a beautiful wedding ceremony. It was amazing. We went on our honeymoon afterward, and my parents covered almost the entire cost. They kept saying, "You're our only daughter. We want you to have your dream wedding." The only thing missing from the wedding was the marriage license. Okay, that's an interesting sentence. A year and a half earlier, I was dealing with serious health problems. I had just graduated, and I didn't have health insurance. So my boyfriend and I got legally married at the courthouse, so I could be added to his insurance.
It was always supposed to be temporary paperwork. We still planned to have a real wedding later. A few months after the courthouse ceremony, he even surprised me with an actual proposal. We planned the wedding, had the ceremony, and now we're talking about starting a family. Honestly, that doesn't sound that unusual. I've heard of couples doing courthouse marriages early for immigration, insurance, military benefits, all kinds of practical reasons. Very few people knew we'd already signed the legal paperwork. Part of the reason was that I wasn't comfortable talking about my health issues. My husband respected that. My parents knew, but my mother-in-law didn't. Recently, while helping us pack for a move, she found our marriage license. At first she said, "You should frame this." Then she noticed the date. Uh-oh, I can already see where this is going. She completely lost it. She accused us of lying, said the wedding was just a gift grab. Then she called my husband's aunt, who also started accusing us of being deceptive. The aunt even said she wanted her wedding gift back. OP says, "We're perfectly willing to return it if that's what she wants." I think this really comes down to one question. What counts as the wedding? Legally, sure, they were already married. But emotionally, socially, to their families, the ceremony they celebrated together clearly was their wedding. That's the day they exchanged vows in front of everyone they loved. That's the day they planned for. That's the day they went on their honeymoon. That's the anniversary they want to celebrate. The part that convinced me they weren't trying to scam anyone was the health insurance. They weren't secretly married for years while pretending to be engaged just to collect presents. There was an actual reason they handled the paperwork early. And it sounds like they still intended to have the celebration all along. I also noticed something else. Their wedding website literally said that people's presence was enough. Nobody was required to bring gifts. Most guests chose to anyway. That doesn't really fit the picture of someone throwing a fake wedding for free stuff. If I found out one of my friends had done this, I'd probably just say, "Oh, that actually makes sense," and move on. Maybe I'd tease them for having 2 anniversaries, but I don't think I'd feel betrayed. There's probably no way everyone was going to agree on this one. Some people see the legal paperwork as the only thing that matters. Others see the celebration with family and friends as the real wedding. I can understand why the mother-in-law was surprised, but calling the entire event a gift grab feels like a huge leap based on what we've heard. Reddit really does have a story for everything. Because somehow, we've gone from wedding drama to a battle over strawberries. AITA for spraying the neighborhood kids with my garden hose? I absolutely love strawberries. So much that I planted 300 strawberry plants in my garden. Every year I make strawberry jam for my family, friends, and neighbors. Anything left over gets donated to the local food bank. Okay, this already sounds like somebody's dream retirement hobby. Lately, I've had a huge problem with neighborhood kids coming into my yard and stealing strawberries. The last time I caught them, they weren't just picking fruit. They trampled more than 50 strawberry plants. I warned them that next time I'd call the police. But this afternoon, I caught them again. So instead of calling the police, I grabbed the garden hose and sprayed them while chasing them out of my yard. I can picture this way too clearly. Not long afterward, a group of angry parents showed up at my house. None of them apologized for what their kids had done. Instead, one mother threatened to sue me. Apparently, her 8-year-old son's iPhone X was ruined by the water. OP replied, "Maybe that's your problem for giving an 8-year-old a $1,000 phone." And then threatened to spray the parents with the hose too if they didn't leave the property. You know, if this story had started with, "I sprayed random kids for no reason," that'd be one thing. But these kids had already been warned. They'd already damaged the garden once before, and according to OP, they came right back. The part that surprised me wasn't even the kids. They're kids. Sometimes kids make dumb decisions. What caught me off guard was the parents showing up angry. without first asking, so, did my kid actually destroy someone else's property? That seems like the first question I'd want answered. I also keep thinking about those strawberry plants. 300 plants isn't some little backyard decoration. That's months of work. Planting them, watering them, keeping weeds away, waiting for them to produce fruit. Watching 50 of them get crushed would be incredibly frustrating. And the phone. I mean, if you're letting an 8-year-old run through somebody else's garden carrying an expensive phone, you're already taking a pretty big gamble. Now, could OP have just called the police instead? Sure, that's probably the calmer option. But compared to getting the police involved, getting sprayed with a garden hose on a warm afternoon honestly sounds like the lighter consequence. I have a feeling those kids probably remembered that hose a lot longer than they would have remembered another warning. Whether that means they'll finally stay out of the strawberry patch, who knows? But something tells me OP's berries might be a little safer after this. Here's another one that immediately made me stop for a second, because this isn't really about a car, it's about trust. AITA for selling my daughter's car after discovering she was texting while driving? When my daughter was 14, my wife and I promised we'd buy her a car when she turned 16. But there was a condition. Actually, several. She had to keep good grades, be responsible, tell us where she was going, only have one passenger at first. And then there were the two non-negotiables. Don't drink and drive, don't text and drive. Those seem pretty reasonable. They bought her a 2012 Honda Civic. Everything was going great. She had a summer job. She was hanging out with friends. In a few months, she'd be heading off to college. Then, someone started posting videos of dangerous drivers in the neighborhood. And one of those drivers was their daughter. One video showed her looking down at her phone while rolling through a stop sign. Another showed her staring at her phone at a traffic light. They later found more examples, including videos she'd posted herself. That part surprised me. Not that she was caught, that she posted some of it herself. So the parents made a decision. They sold the car. The daughter completely fell apart. She argued, "I didn't hurt anyone. Everyone does it. How am I supposed to get to work? What about college?" Her parents basically said, "You can walk, ride your bike, or take the bus." Then she asked, "How can you send your daughter to college without caring about her safety?" The dad replied, "Now you're worried about safety?" Oof, I bet that ended the conversation pretty quickly. Now the grandparents think the punishment went way too far. They say grounding would have been enough. They've even threatened to buy her another car themselves. This is actually tougher than I expected, because selling the car is a huge consequence. It's not like taking away the keys for a weekend. It's gone. But then I keep coming back to one thing. The parents didn't make this rule after catching her. It was there from the very beginning. They were crystal clear. Don't text and drive. If there was one condition that absolutely couldn't be ignored, it was that one. And the argument, "I didn't hurt anyone." I get why teenagers say that. But the whole point is that you don't wait until somebody gets hurt. You stop the behavior before it turns into a tragedy. That's why people take distracted driving so seriously. I also don't think this was one isolated mistake. It wasn't, "I glanced at my phone once." According to the story, there were multiple videos. Enough that the parents felt this had become a pattern instead of a lapse in judgment. I do understand why the grandparents think the punishment was harsh. If you're looking at it emotionally, it feels severe. But if you're looking at it as, "We made one major safety rule, and it was repeatedly broken," I can understand why the parents felt they had to follow through. Because once you make a consequence that serious, backing out of it sends a very different message. This is one of those stories where I can see why people are split. I'd really be interested to hear where you guys land on this one. Was selling the car too extreme? Or was it exactly the consequence they warned about from the start? The title of this one already sounds like a sitcom. But knowing Reddit, it's probably going to be way messier than that. AITA for leaving a fake positive pregnancy test in the bedroom to catch my husband's mom snooping? My mother-in-law moved in with us about a month ago. After a while, I started noticing little things changing. Furniture had been moved. Items weren't where I'd left them. I thought I was losing my mind. My husband was the only other person who should have had access to the bedroom, but he insisted he wasn't touching anything. So I started wondering if his mom had been going through our room. That's such a weird feeling, when something is just different enough that you notice, but not enough to actually prove anything. I brought it up with my husband. He immediately said, "My mom would never do that." So OP came up with a plan. She bought one of those fake positive pregnancy tests and left it in the bedroom trash can. Not out in the open, just inside the trash. I already know where this is going. The very next day, she started getting congratulatory calls and texts from her husband's family. Her husband even showed up at her workplace, asking why she hadn't told him she was pregnant. She asked, "How did you find out?" He answered, "My mom found the positive test in the bedroom trash can." Well, case closed. OP responded, "So, doesn't that prove she's been snooping in our bedroom?" For a moment, her husband realized what had happened, but then he immediately focused on something else. He demanded to know whether she was actually pregnant. She explained the test was fake. It was only there to prove his mom was going through their room. He still wasn't convinced. He made her take a real pregnancy test right in front of him. When it came back negative, he became furious. He accused her of lying, breaking his mother's heart, and manipulating everyone. Now the entire family is calling her a liar. I have to admit, I laughed a little when the husband accidentally confessed that his mom had found the test in the bedroom trash. Because that's exactly what OP had been trying to prove. The funny part is, the trap actually worked. Almost too well. Now, do I think planting fake evidence is usually a great idea? Not really. It can backfire. And in this case, it definitely created a lot of drama. But I also understand why OP felt cornered. She kept saying someone was entering the bedroom. Nobody believed her. She couldn't install a camera. So she came up with another way to confirm her suspicion. What surprised me most was the husband's reaction afterward. For about 5 seconds, he seemed to realize, oh, my mom really has been snooping. Then, somehow, that stopped being the issue. Instead, the conversation became, how could you upset my mother? That feels like a pretty big shift. I also couldn't help thinking, if your mom finds something in the private bedroom trash can, maybe the first question shouldn't be, why did my wife do this? Maybe it should be, why was my mom digging through our bedroom trash? This whole situation probably would have been avoided if everyone had respected one very simple boundary. A married couple's bedroom is, well, their bedroom. If you're invited to stay in someone's home, that usually doesn't include searching through their private space. I'm not sure the fake test was the perfect solution, but I can definitely understand why OP reached the point where she felt she needed proof. All right. I think it's probably time to head back to the surface for a bit. I'm almost completely out of food, and I've only got a couple of torches left. That's usually Minecraft's way of telling you, yeah, you've pushed your luck enough for one trip. We'll drop everything off, restock, craft a fresh stack of torches, and then we're definitely coming right back down here. Because we've barely explored this cave. Every tunnel seems to lead to another tunnel, and I have a feeling there are still a lot of good resources waiting for us down here. Well, this title immediately made me wonder what damaged my plants actually means. Because that could be anything from breaking a flower pot to something much worse. AITA for canceling the family trip because my stepson damaged my plants? I grow indoor plants all around the house. It's one of my favorite hobbies. I don't have a huge yard, so I take care of plants inside instead. I have a 16-year-old stepson named Sean. He loves pulling pranks. Most of them haven't been that serious. He hides my gardening tools, or swaps them out with broken ones. Recently, he posted a video of himself dumping cold water on me while I was asleep. He uploaded it to Facebook for the family to see. I'd be annoyed too, especially if I woke up to find myself becoming the joke online. I made him delete the video. He begged to keep it up, but I said no. After that,
He spent a few days sulking. Then, out of nowhere, he became really friendly. He even asked if he could water my plants. I thought that was a nice gesture, so I handed him the watering can. I have a really bad feeling about where this is going. Later that evening, I noticed a strange smell coming from the watering can. It smelled like bleach. I checked the plants. They smelled the same. I confronted Sean. At first, he denied everything, but after I found a bottle of bleach in his room, he admitted he'd watered all the plants with it. He said he did it to get revenge for making him delete the prank video. Wow, that escalated way beyond a prank. OP immediately canceled the family trip to the national park. It was something Sean had been looking forward to. He started crying, said he'd made a mistake in the heat of the moment. But OP refused to change the punishment. His wife argued that an apology should have been enough. She said he was just a kid. She even called canceling the trip abusive. According to OP, Sean has learned that as long as he apologizes afterward, everything goes back to normal. I think that's the part that stood out to me most, not the bleach. The expectation that saying, sorry, automatically erases whatever happened. Because that's not really how life works. Apologies matter. They absolutely do. But they're usually the beginning of making things right, not the end of it. And in this case, those plants weren't just decorations. They were something OP had spent a lot of time caring for. Some of them might not even survive. I also have to point out, this wasn't a split-second accident. He didn't knock over a plant while running through the house.
he found bleach, poured it into the watering can, then walked from plant to plant watering every single one. That's a lot of opportunities to stop and think, maybe I shouldn't do this. Now, would I have canceled the trip? Maybe, maybe not. There are probably a few different punishments that could have made the point, but I definitely don't think pretending nothing happened would have helped either, especially if this pattern has been going on for a while. The bigger issue here doesn't seem to be the plants. It seems like Sean still hasn't learned where the line is between a prank and deliberately hurting someone because he's angry. Until that lesson sinks in, I have a feeling this probably won't be the last argument this family has. This next title made me stop for a second, because depending on what happened, this is either going to sound completely unreasonable or completely justified. AITA for calling the police on my client? I'm 28 and I babysit on weekends for some extra money. There's one family I probably should have stopped working for a long time ago. The kids are sweet. The job itself is easy, but there's one huge problem. The mom is never home when she says she'll be. She used to never even give me a return time. She'd say she was going out for brunch, then disappear from 11 in the morning until 7 at night. So eventually I started asking for specific times. She'd give me one, and then ignore it anyway. No phone call, no text, nothing. That's got to get old really fast, especially when your entire day depends on someone keeping their word. Last Saturday, I arrived at 6 in the evening. She promised she'd be home by 9. I even reminded her that I already had plans with friends afterward. She promised she'd be on time. 9 o'clock came. No, Mom. I called. No answer. I texted. No answer. 10 o'clock. Still nothing. Midnight. Still nothing. My plans were obviously ruined by then, but at that point I was more worried than angry. Yeah, I'd probably be wondering if something had happened. A car accident, a medical emergency, anything. I left her a voicemail. I told her that if she wasn't home within the hour, I'd consider the children abandoned and call the police. I texted the exact same thing. 30 minutes later, I tried again. My calls went straight to voicemail. My texts were left on read. She still never responded. So after giving her another 15 minutes, I called the non-emergency police line. The officers arrived. I showed them the text messages proving she'd agreed to be home by 9. They couldn't reach her either. So they took the children to the police station, and I finally went home. At 3 in the morning, she called me in a panic. Where are my kids? I told her exactly where they were. She screamed at me. I hung up. The next day, she sent me a long message. The children's father had been contacted. Child Protective Services had opened an investigation. She blamed me for all of it. Then OP talked to a friend. The friend said, "You should have just waited and never babysat for her again." I think that's where my opinion changed a little. At first, I wondered if maybe calling the police was too much. But then I went back through the timeline. She wasn't 30 minutes late. She wasn't even an hour late. She was over 4 hours late, ignoring every call, ignoring every text, even after being told exactly what would happen. And that's the part I can't get past. It wasn't like she never got the warning. She read the message. She just didn't respond. I also don't think babysitters are supposed to become indefinite emergency childcare. At some point, you're no longer running late. You're leaving someone else responsible for your children without their agreement. That's a completely different situation. Could the investigation create serious problems for the mom? Absolutely. But those consequences didn't start when OP called the police. They started when she chose not to come home and ignored every opportunity to fix it. The friend's advice sounds reasonable until you remember one thing. How long exactly was OP supposed to keep waiting? 1 more hour? 3? Until sunrise? Nobody could answer that. This is one of those stories where the outcome feels harsh, but I honestly don't see what better option OP had once every attempt to contact the mom had failed. I'd be really interested to hear where you guys draw the line. At what point would you have made that call? This one's pretty short, but I have a feeling the comments were anything but. AITA for forcing my boyfriend to do the dishes? I'm lactose intolerant. Every time I make tacos, my boyfriend always makes jokes about how I'm disrespecting Mexican culture by not having cheese in my tacos. I've told him multiple times I'm not going to give myself the shits just to make him feel better about my friggin' tacos. He's not even Mexican, he's white. That last sentence definitely tells you how frustrated OP already was before any of this happened. This came to a head last night when we were having tacos again. I got up to go to the bathroom, and when I came back, I noticed my taco looked tampered with. I went to inspect it, and lo and behold, there's cheese buried underneath the other ingredients. Seriously? Who does that? I told my boyfriend he was a raging douche canoe and went to bed, leaving him to do the cleanup. I still haven't spoken to him all morning, and he's complaining about how I forced him to do the dishes because normally I do them. AITA here? Honestly, the dishes aren't even the issue here. The issue is that he intentionally messed with someone else's food after being told multiple times that they couldn't eat it. Whether it's lactose intolerance, an allergy, or any other dietary restriction. If someone says, "Don't put this in my food," you don't secretly put it in their food. That's just basic respect. Could he have thought it was a joke? Maybe. But jokes are supposed to be funny for everyone involved. This one would have left OP dealing with stomach pain just so he could get a laugh. And then complaining about having to wash the dishes afterward. That feels like focusing on completely the wrong problem. I'd be curious what you guys think. Is making him clean up afterward a fair consequence? Or is the bigger issue that he decided to tamper with her food in the first place? The title alone tells you this has probably been building up for years. Because nobody cuts a parent off over one conversation. AITA for giving my dad his money back in front of his other kids and telling him he was no longer welcome at my graduation. My graduation ceremony is being held next week. My dad had given me some money in advance to pay for the party. I live mostly with my mom, but they were supposed to be hosting the event together. Dad and I have a rocky relationship. After my parents divorced when I was 4, they split custody of me, and he was able to stay a good dad. When I was 10, he met Jane. Jane had 3 kids, twins, and another child. They got married when I was 12, but I would say even before that I felt like he prioritized her kids over me a lot. He would cancel plans with me if they wanted to do something, and would either do the thing with them or force me to go and say it was even better than our plans. When for me it wasn't. Think going for a hike with me versus taking them to an indoor play area. or seeing a movie with me versus the kiddie park. Already, you can kind of see where this is heading. It's not one huge event, it's a lot of smaller moments adding up. One more example is when I was given a ticket for a concert my dad and I both love. He was supposed to buy a ticket to come with me for some father-son time, but instead spent the money on his youngest stepkid who wanted their room painted. He told me at the last minute, and it hurt. There are other times stuff like this happened. He didn't show up at the hospital when I broke my arm because one stepkid was getting their tonsils out and wanted both him and his wife there.
He told my mom over the phone to tell me he was proud of me for being brave and understanding, even though I never said that shit. Ouch. That hospital story is rough. When I would bring this stuff up to him, he'd tell me it was natural to feel jealous of sharing his attention. That was all he would say. In 2019, he told my mom he would split the cost of a trip I wanted to go on with one of my clubs because she didn't have the money by herself. Mom had her half saved. We told my dad he needed to pay. He said bills were tight, and it was the twins' birthdays, and the money needed to go towards something for them. He told me we could do something as a family when the trip happened instead. I told him to forget it, that he was making it clear who was more important, and I was going to stay with my mom where I actually mattered. Mom borrowed money to cover the other half of the trip.
That's the kind of thing you remember for a long time. Dad told me he regretted making me feel less important, and we were working on things. Then he gave me the graduation money about a month ago. Then, a week ago, he called and told me how one of the stepkids was being bullied, how bad of a time they were having, and how, with that money, they could help cheer them up for their birthday. I was pissed. I hung up. Then 2 days later, I showed up at his doorstep, gave him the money, and told him I didn't want to see him or his new family at my graduation, and that he had chosen who was more important, so he better stay out of my life. His stepkids and 2 younger biological kids were there. I didn't stick around. He called and told me we needed to talk it out like adults, and that I had hurt the kids' feelings. His wife freaked out on me, so I blocked her. AITA? The graduation money wasn't really the issue. It was just the last straw. Reading this, I kept noticing the same pattern. Every time OP and his dad had something planned, or every time the dad made a promise, something involving the other kids seemed to come first. Once, that happens. Twice, maybe it's bad luck. But after years of it, it's understandable why OP stopped believing things would ever change. The phone call about the graduation money really stood out to me. Because if someone gives you money for your graduation, then asks for it back so another child can have a better birthday, whether they mean to or not, that sends a pretty painful message. The only part I feel conflicted about is doing it in front of the younger kids. They probably had no idea what had been going on for years. They're not really responsible for the adults' choices. But at the same time, OP didn't create that situation. He showed up, returned the money, said what he needed to say, and left. The kids happened to be there. This story feels less like one argument, and more like years of disappointment finally catching up with someone. I'm curious what you all think. Was uninviting his dad from graduation going too far, or was that relationship already over long before this conversation happened? This title made me think it was going to be another simple parents asked for rent story. Then I kept reading, and realized it's really about something else. AITA for moving out when my parents asked me to pay rent? I'm 23 and the oldest of 5 siblings. I'm a full-time student and I also have a part-time job in my field. When I complete my after degree, my employer will take me on full-time. I make enough from my part-time job to pay for school and put money aside. My siblings range from 20 to 10 years old. Both of my parents work full-time. I've taken on a lot of the responsibilities for keeping everything running in the house. I do the grocery shopping, the laundry, make suppers, and do meal prep so everyone has lunches ready every day. I also make sure all my siblings do their part with the household chores. For example, my youngest brother is responsible for feeding and walking the dogs, so I make sure there's dog food in storage and poop bags on the leash. My dad works very long hours, and my mom works a hard 9-to-5 job. That's a lot, especially while being a full-time student. Over Christmas, I had a chance to buy myself a PS5, so I did. The rest of my family still shares a PS4. I keep my PS5 in my room and I don't share it. My parents started getting complaints from my oldest brother about how I make so much money and don't share the things I buy for myself, which is true. So they sat me down to talk about it. I pointed out how much of the household work I already did, and they said it wasn't fair that I was earning so much money without contributing financially. Then they told me how much rent they expected me to pay. Okay, so OP went and did the math. I went to my room and figured everything out. If I paid them what they wanted, I'd only have about $800 a month left over. If I dropped a couple of classes next semester, I could almost work full-time with my employer. It would only take 1 extra year to finish my second degree. But I could afford my own place and have way more free time and disposable income. So I packed up and moved out. Everything I owned fit in my car. I stayed in an Airbnb for 2 weeks while I sorted out an apartment, school, and work. It was great. I'm not gonna lie, I may have gone a little overboard on Tinder. I couldn't exactly have women over at my parents' house. I wasn't expecting that sentence. I just moved into my own apartment. I'm staying part-time until I finish this semester. I'll work full-time over the summer and take a lighter class load with more work hours in the fall. My oldest brother has now been tasked with doing everything I used to do. His chores have been split up among the other 3 siblings. They're all mad at me for moving out. My parents are upset because I left them in the lurch. My siblings are angry because everyone has more chores now. My oldest brother is especially salty because he has no free time to see his girlfriend, and she isn't allowed over when my parents aren't home. I'm enjoying my free time. I bought myself a plant from IKEA. I feel bad for screwing them all over, but it didn't make sense for me to do all that work and pay rent on top. Edit. All the chores were split fairly. I wasn't doing any more than anyone else. I thought it was fair until I was asked to put in money as well. I think the important detail here is that OP didn't argue about the rent. He just made a different financial decision. Parents are absolutely allowed to ask an adult child to pay rent. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But an adult child is also allowed to decide, if I'm paying rent anyway, I'd rather have my own place. Those 2 things can both be true. What really stood out to me was everyone's reaction after OP left. Nobody seemed upset because they missed having OP around. They were upset because now they had to do all the work OP had been doing. That says quite a bit. And honestly, the little IKEA plant at the end somehow made me laugh. After everything else in the story, it felt like OP was just sitting in a quiet apartment thinking, yep, this was worth it. I'm curious what you think. Were the parents being reasonable by asking for rent? Or did they accidentally push their most helpful kid into realizing he was better off living on his own? This title already has me wondering one thing. Did she actually steal the car? Or was this one of those situations where everyone just assumed she'd be allowed to keep using it? AITA for reporting my car stolen when my sister took it after I told her not to. My sister's car broke down 6 months ago because of her own stupidity. I won't go into it here, but she ignored the advice of a mechanic, and because of that, her car broke. I decided to be nice and offer her my car until she could get hers fixed, since I could bike to work while she needed to drive. She did not get her car fixed for some reason. She claimed to be saving money to do so, but every time her paycheck came, she spent it. My parents even offered her a loan to fix her car, but she refused. Along with all of this, she has been abusing my generosity by taking my car all day and night. I told her she could use it for work, but it seems to her that this is a free pass to use my car, not fill it with gas, and take it even when I specifically tell her not to. 6 months. That's a lot longer than I was expecting. Recently, I've been needing to get to work very early, and I really don't feel like riding my bike 6 miles at 3 in the morning. So I told my sister she had 30 days until I took the spare key from her and she would no longer be allowed to use my car. That was 32 days ago. Yesterday morning, she woke up before me and took my car anyway, at 2:30 in the morning. I called her and demanded she bring it back. She just hung up on me. Because of this, I reported it stolen. That escalated fast. My sister was arrested 30 minutes later, and my parents had to go bail her out. My sister is now facing charges for unauthorized use of a vehicle. My parents and my sister are furious. They say I went way too far. They're worried that if she's found guilty, she'll lose her job. But in my opinion, it's her own fault. Am I wrong here? Am I the asshole? I think the key detail here is the timeline. OP didn't wake up one morning and suddenly call the police. They let their sister use the car for 6 months. They gave her 30 days notice that the arrangement was over. Then they even waited 2 extra days. After all that, she deliberately got up before OP, took the car anyway, and when OP called, she hung up. That's a pretty difficult detail to ignore. I also keep coming back to something else. If someone tells you, you no longer have permission to use my car, and you knowingly take it anyway, what exactly are they supposed to report it as? Because from OP's perspective, their car had been taken without permission.
Now, do I understand why the parents are upset? Of course. Nobody wants to see one of their kids arrested, but that doesn't automatically make the police call unreasonable. Sometimes people end up facing legal consequences because they ignored a very clear boundary. This story feels like it stopped being about a car a long time ago. It became about whether OP's sister believed the rules applied to her at all. And judging by the fact that she hung up the phone after taking the car, I'm not sure she expected there to be any real consequences. I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Was reporting it stolen the only realistic option? Or should OP have handled it some other way?
All right. Last story. And this one honestly caught me off guard. AITA for going to the police over a prank? Throw away for anonymity's sake in case this does go further. To preface this, I, 24F, am vegan and have been for a good 10 years. I have not eaten meat since I was roughly 3 or 4 years old when I found out where meat comes from. Spoiler alert, there were a lot of tears. This is no secret, and everyone in my life knows and respects this. Or so I thought. 4 nights ago I was at a party and, I'll admit, I got white girl wasted. My friends thought it would be funny to feed me chicken nuggets as a prank. I checked with them before chowing down. Are these vegan? To which my friends replied, yeah, they're sun-fed, a type of vegan chickenless chicken. They tasted off to me, but I figured it was just because I was drunk. I was wrong. That question, are these vegan, really changes everything. I found out the next day when my sister sent me a message telling me to check my friend's Snapchat story. The story showed the nugget packaging, then showed them giving them to me, including the conversation where I asked if they were vegan. Then later, they mocked me and pretended to be me after finding out I'd eaten meat. Things like fake crying and yelling, "The chickens!" Yeah, that's pretty hard to defend. I took a screen recording of the video and took it to the police on the grounds of food tampering. Now, 3 of my ex-friends are facing charges. They all think I'm overreacting to a harmless prank. In my view, they took advantage of my drunken state, tampered with my food, and publicly humiliated me. In their view, it was just a prank. I feel like the word prank gets used way too loosely sometimes. A prank is convincing someone there's a spider on their shoulder, or putting googly eyes on everything in the fridge. Lying to someone about what's in their food, after they specifically asked you, is something completely different. Whether the reason is an allergy, a religious belief, or a personal ethical choice, people deserve to know what they're eating. That shouldn't be controversial, and honestly, the Snapchat video might have been the biggest mistake they made. If they'd simply apologized, this story could have gone in a very different direction. Instead, they recorded themselves doing it, posted it online, and basically documented the whole thing. If you're confident enough to film yourself doing something, you probably shouldn't be shocked when that recording ends up being used as evidence later. This one definitely doesn't feel like a harmless joke to me. It feels like a group of people deciding someone else's boundaries didn't matter as long as they got a laugh.
And that's gonna do it for today's stories. I'm really curious which one had the wildest ending in your opinion, because there were a few that genuinely surprised me. If you enjoyed hanging out, don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you want more Reddit stories like these. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.